Disturbing human experiments aren't something that the average person thinks too much about. Rather, the progress achieved in the last 150 years of human history is an accomplishment we are almost reminded of daily. Achievements made in fields like biomedicine and psychology mean that we no longer need to worry about things like deadly diseases or masturbation as a form of insanity. For better or worse, we have developed more effective ways to gather information, treat skin abnormalities, and even kill each other. But what we are not constantly reminded of are the human lives that have been damaged or lost in the name of this progress. The following is a list of the most disturbing human experiments in history. The Monster Study. The Monster Study was a stuttering experiment on 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939, conducted by Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa. Johnson chose one of his graduate students, Mary Tudor, to conduct the experiment, and he supervised her research. After placing the children into control and experimental groups, Tudor gave positive speech therapy to half of the children, praising the fluency of their speech, and negative speech therapy to the other half, belittling the children for every speech imperfection and telling them that they were stutterers. Many of the normal speaking orphan children who received negative therapy in the experiment suffered negative psychological effects, and some retained speech problems during the course of their life. Dubbed the Monster Study by some of Johnson's peers, who were horrified that he would experiment on orphan children to prove a theory, the experiment was kept hidden for the fear that Johnson's reputation would be tarnished in the wake of human experiments conducted by the Nazis in World War II. The University of Iowa publicly apologized for the Monster Study in 2001. Project MKULTRA. Project MKULTRA, or MKULTRA, was the code name for the CIA mind control research program run by the Office of Scientific Intelligence that began in the early 1950s and continued through to the late 1960s. There is much published evidence that the project involved the surreptitious use of many types of drugs, as well as other methodologies to manipulate individuals' mental states and alter brain function. Experiments included administering LSD to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, prostitutes, mentally ill patients, and members of the general public in order to study their reactions. LSD and other drugs were usually administered without the subject's knowledge and informed consent, a violation of the Nuremberg Code that the US agreed to follow after World War II. Efforts to recruit subjects were often illegal, even discounting the fact that drugs were being administered, though actual use of LSD, for example, was legal in the United States until the 6th of October 1966. In Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA set up several brothels to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. The men were dosed with LSD, and the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MKULTRA files to be destroyed. Pursuant to this order, most CIA documents regarding the project were destroyed, making a full investigation of MKULTRA virtually impossible. North Korean experiments. There have been many reports of North Korean human experimentation. These reports show human rights abuses similar to those of Nazi and Japanese human experimentation in World War II. These allegations of human rights abuses are denied by the North Korean government, who claim that all prisoners in North Korea are humanely treated. One former North Korean woman prisoner tells how 50 healthy women prisoners were selected and given poisoned cabbage leaves, which all women had to eat despite cries of distress from those who had already eaten it. All 50 were dead after 20 minutes of vomiting blood and anal bleeding. Refusing to eat would have meant reprisals against them and their families. Kwon Hoyuk, a former prison head of security at Camp 22, described laboratories equipped for poison gas, suffocation gas, and blood experiments, in which 3 or 4 people, normally a family, are experimental subjects. After undergoing medical checks, the chambers are sealed and poison is injected through a tube while scientists observe from above. Kwon Hoyuk claimed that he watched a family of 2 parents, a son and a daughter, die from suffocating gas, with the parents trying to save the children using mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for as long as they had the strength. Unit 731. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that undertook lethal human experimentation during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. It was responsible for some of the most notorious war crimes carried out by Japanese personnel. Some of the numerous atrocities committed by Commando Shiro Ishii and others under his command in Unit 731 include vivisection of living people, including pregnant women who were impregnated by the doctors. Prisoners had limbs amputated and reattached to other parts of their bodies. Some prisoners had their bodies frozen and thawed out to study the results of untreated gangrene. Humans were also used as living test cases for grenades and flamethrowers. prisoners were injected with strains of diseases disguised as vaccines to study their effects. To study the effects of untreated venereal diseases, male and female prisoners were deliberately infected with syphilis and gonorrhea via rape, then studied. Having been granted immunity by the American occupation authorities at the end of the war, Ishii never spent any time in jail for his crimes and died at the age of 67 from throat cancer. Nazi human experimentation. Nazi human experimentation was medical experimentation on large numbers of people by the German Nazi regime in its concentration camps during World War II. At Auschwitz, under the direction of Dr. Edward Werths, selected inmates were subjected to various experiments which were supposedly designed to help German military personnel in combat situations, to aid the recovery of military personnel that had been injured, and to advance racial ideology backed by the Third Reich. Experiments on twin children in concentration camps were created to show the similarities and differences in genetics of twins, as well as to see if the human body can be unnaturally manipulated. The central leader of the experiments was Dr. Joseph Mengele, who performed experiments on over 1,500 sets of imprisoned twins, of which fewer than 200 individuals survived the studies. Dr. Mengele organised the testing of genetics in twins. The twins were arranged by age and sex and kept in barracks in between the test, which ranged from the injection of different chemicals into the eyes of the twins to see if it would change their colour, to literally sewing twins together in the hope of creating conjoined twins. In 1942, the Luftwaffe conducted experiments to learn how to treat hypothermia. One study forced subjects to endure a tank of ice-cold water for up to 3 hours. Another study placed prisoners naked in the open for several hours with temperatures below freezing. The experimenters assessed different ways of rewarming survivors. From July 1942 to September 1943, experiments to investigate the effectiveness of sulfonamide, a synthetic antimicrobial agent, were conducted at Ravensbrück. Wounds inflicted on subjects were infected with bacteria such as streptococcus, gas gangrene, and tetanus. Circulation of blood was interrupted by tying off blood vessels at both ends of the wound to create conditions similar to that of a battlefield wound. Infection was aggravated by forcing wood shavings and ground glass into the wounds. The infection was treated by sulfonamide and other drugs to determine their effectiveness. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and subscribe to my channel to keep up to date with my weekly videos. Also, don't forget to keep in touch on all my social media sites, the links are down below. See you next time.